My ruthless parents tried to take my $37,000 startup fund for my jobless brother, but my perfect plan made them regret ever underestimating me. My older brother, Matt, is the golden child. He's 24 and has coasted through life so far. He doesn't work, hasn't had a job in months, and whenever he's been employed, it always ends because he either quits or gets fired for some foolish reason. He's that guy who gets away with doing nothing and still receives whatever he wants from our parents. Meanwhile, I'm 19, working part-time jobs while attending school. And somehow, I'm the one expected to have it all together. I've been saving for a long time since I was 15. I worked wherever I could, from stocking shelves at the grocery store to delivering food just to build a nest egg for my future. I didn't want to settle for a boring 9-to-5 job. I've had this business idea for years, and while I won't bore you with the details, I was proud of myself. I managed to save $37,000 on my own. No handouts, no help from my parents, just me working every chance I got. That's the money I planned to use to start my business. You'd think my parents would be proud, right? Like, wow, our kid is really putting in the work and being responsible. But no, instead, they act like my savings are just sitting there waiting to be spent on whatever issue Matt has this week. About a month ago, Matt decided he needed a new apartment. He's been living in a small place that's honestly fine for someone who doesn't have a job and isn't paying rent on time half the time. But apparently it wasn't good enough for him anymore. He found a fancy new apartment in one of the nicest parts of town. And of course, he didn't have the money for the deposit. Shocker, when I first heard about it, I wasn't worried. I mean, why would they ask me to pay for it? Matt's a grown man. He can figure it out. But then one night, my parents sat me down. I knew something was up because they never do that unless they're about to drop something heavy. I thought maybe they'd praise me for my savings or ask about my business idea. That would have been nice. Instead, they blindsided me. Oh, we need to talk about Matt. My mom started giving me that serious look she only uses when she's about to guilt trip someone. He found an apartment, but he's short on the deposit. I sat there waiting for her to continue, wondering what this had to do with me. Then she said it. We think it would be a good idea if you gave Matt your savings. He really needs this place and it's just sitting in your account anyway. I blinked at her. Surely, I'd misheard. My savings, the $37,000 I'd spent years earning for Matt's apartment. I couldn't even respond at first. It was like I'd stepped into an alternate reality where people thought that was a reasonable request. Wait, what? Was all I managed to say. And Matt's been going through a rough time, my dad chimed in, trying to sound reasonable. You should think as a family you should help him out. It's not like you need that money right now. I could feel my face heating up. I couldn't believe they were saying this to me. So, you want me to give him my savings? The money I've been saving for my business? Yes, my mom said as if it were obvious. When you're family, you should be willing to help. My mind raced. It wasn't just that they were asking me to give up my savings. It was the way they acted. Like I had no choice, like it was expected and I should just comply because Matt needed it more. Then my dad dropped the real bomb. Well, if you're not willing to help your brother, then maybe you should start looking for another place to live. I swear my heart stopped. They were threatening to kick me out over Matt's apartment, over money I'd earned. I was in shock. How could they think that was okay? I worked for every cent of that $37,000. I had plans. It wasn't just sitting there for fun. It was the start of my future, my way out of depending on anyone else. They must have noticed my silence because my mom started again, saying something about family coming first and how Matt would do the same for me. Spoiler alert, Matt has never done anything for me ever. He's never even offered to help around the house, let alone financially. But somehow I'm supposed to hand over my future for him. I told them I needed time to think, which was just a way to stall. There was no way I was giving them that money, but I didn't know what to do. They were threatening to kick me out and I didn't have a backup plan. I couldn't afford to live on my own yet, not while starting a business. So I spent the next few days trying to figure things out. Meanwhile, my parents acted like I was a villain for not immediately handing over my savings. My dad made passive-aggressive comments like, "Must be nice to have money and not worry about your family." While my mom gave me the cold shoulder. Matt, he didn't say a word to me. Probably didn't care as long as he got his apartment. Things kept getting worse. I was barely processing the whole "give us your $37,000 for Matt's apartment" demand and the pressure was constant. It was like living in a pressure cooker about to explode. Every day, my parents found a way to bring it up. My mom would start random conversations about how Matt was stressed and needed support and how I should step up for the family. Apparently, she was determined to find new ways to guilt trip me. My dad took a different route, not as direct, but he'd throw comments like "you're lucky you don't have real responsibilities yet" or "family sacrifices keep us strong." Yeah. Okay, Dad. Real subtle. I don't know why they thought this would work. If anything, it made me dig in more, but it was getting harder to deal with. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I felt ambushed. They'd be waiting, hoping I'd magically change my mind after their 100th guilt trip. The real kicker was Matt himself. He didn't say much, but that's what angered me most. He didn't care where the money came from, as long as he got his apartment. He'd sit in the living room watching TV or scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the chaos I was enduring. I wanted to snap at him, yell, "Dude, why don't you try getting a job for once?" But I didn't. Maybe I was hoping they'd come to their senses. Spoiler, they didn't. After a few days, I needed space. I didn't have money to move out, thanks to saving for my business, not rent. But I could escape the pressure temporarily. So, I started staying late at school, using the library as a refuge. It was better than being home, facing my parents' relentless campaign to squeeze my savings, but even that didn't last. One afternoon, I came home late, thinking I'd dodged the daily guilt session. As soon as I walked through the door, my mom was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed like I was a rebellious teenager sneaking in past curfew. "Oh, we need to talk," she said, not wasting time. "About what?" I asked, knowing exactly what was coming, but hoping she'd surprise me with something else. "You know what this is about?" She replied, her voice tight with frustration. "Matt's apartment. He needs that money. We've been patient, but we can't wait forever." I could feel the heat rising in my face. I was trying not to lose it. "Mom, I've told you 1,000,000 times. I saved that money for my business. I'm not giving it away," she sighed, acting like she was dealing with unreasonable people. "You're being selfish. You know that Matt's struggling, and you have the means to help. If you were in his shoes, we'd expect him to help you." That line set me off. The idea that Matt would ever help me was laughable. "Matt wouldn't lift a finger for me, and you know it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "He hasn't even asked me for the money. He's just waiting for you to hand it to him." My mom's face tightened like she didn't want to admit I was right, but knew it. "He's your brother," she said quietly. "Family helps each other." I shook my head. Family helps each other, but it goes both ways. I'm not here to bail him out every time he screws up. I've worked too hard for that money. At that point, my dad joined the conversation, walking into the kitchen with a look like he was about to deliver a grand speech. "Your mom's right," he said, crossing his arms. "This isn't just about money. It's about family. You don't understand yet because you're young, but you'll see that sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the people you love." I couldn't believe my ears. They were acting like I was heartless for not wanting to throw away years of work so Matt could live in a nicer place. "And what about me?" I shot back. "Doesn't my future matter? I'm not sitting on this money for fun. I saved it for a reason, for my business." "You can always save more money later," my dad said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "But Matt needs this apartment now." It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter what I said, they kept returning to the same point. Matt needed the money, so I should give it up. It didn't matter what I'd planned or how hard I'd worked. None of that mattered to them. The worst part, they didn't care about Matt's responsibility in this. They weren't pushing him to find a job or figure things out. Nope. It was all on me to fix his problems. Just like always, whenever Matt screwed up, I had to make up for it. I knew arguing wouldn't change their minds. They'd decided long ago, probably before that first sit down, that my savings were Matt's. The pressure wouldn't stop until I gave in or left. Honestly, leaving was starting to look like my only option. But it wasn't simple. I didn't have a backup plan or enough money to cover rent and keep my savings intact. My friends didn't have spare rooms. I felt trapped. Either I gave them the money and sacrificed my future, or I stood my ground and risked being kicked out with nowhere to go. The worst part, my parents didn't care about fairness or my future. Just making sure Matt was taken care of, no matter what it cost me. After a week of constant pressure, I hit my limit. I couldn't take the guilt tripping, the passive-aggressive comments, or feeling like the bad guy no matter what I did. The worst wasn't what they said. It was that they truly believed Matt was entitled to my money, like it was his birthright just because he needed an apartment. I was exhausted, hiding out at school or working part-time to avoid home. But I couldn't disappear completely. They always cornered me, looping back to how I needed to step up for Matt. One evening, I decided I was done. I wasn't giving Matt my savings, and if that meant leaving, so be it. I'd rather be on the street than give up what I'd worked for. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't keep living like this. I had to take a stand. When I got home that night, my parents were waiting in the living room, their faces set like they'd planned this all day. The tension was palpable before I even sat down. "Have you made a decision yet?" my dad asked, skipping small talk. I knew he meant, "Have you given in?" "Yeah. I've made my decision," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm not giving Matt my savings." The silence was thick, like the air had been sucked out. My dad stared, jaw tight, while my mom looked like she was about to cry. "Are you serious?" My mom finally said, her voice shaking. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Here we go." The guilt-tripping Olympics. "Mom, I've told you 1,000 times that money is for my business. I've been saving it for years. I'm not handing it over because Matt doesn't feel like working." My dad leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "It's not about Matt not working. It's about family. Right now, your brother needs help. We've given you everything and all we're asking is this one thing." I almost laughed. "You're asking me to give up everything I've saved. It's not a small favor. You're asking me to throw away my future so Matt can get an apartment he hasn't worked for. And Matt's been going through a tough time," my mom said, wiping her eyes. "Son, he needs this. You have no idea what it's like to struggle the way he has." "Hey, Mom. Are you serious?" I replied. "I've been working my ass off since I was 15, saving every cent for this business. You're acting like I haven't been struggling, too." "Son, we've helped you plenty," my dad cut in. "We gave you a roof over your head, supported you through school." "Supported me," I snapped. "I've been paying for everything myself. You haven't given me a dime for school and you know it." I could feel the anger building. I wasn't usually the type to yell, but I was tired of this. Every time I defended myself, they twisted it, making me the unreasonable one. "Look, I'm not doing this," I said, standing up. "If you want to kick me out because I won't give Matt my savings, then fine, I'll leave. But I'm not giving him a single cent." My mom gasped like I'd announced I was disowning the family. "Son, you'd really leave your family over money?" "No. No, Mom. You're the ones kicking me out?" I shot back. "You're making this about money, not me." For a moment, I thought they might get it, realize how messed up this was and back off. But no, my dad stood, crossing his arms. "If you're not willing to help your brother," he said, "then you're not welcome in this house." There it was, the ultimatum. I felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger that they'd go through with this, but relief that the waiting was over. I knew where I stood. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "I'll be out by the end of the week." My mom burst into tears and my dad stood there looking like he'd won a moral victory. Matt, of course, wasn't even home, probably out with friends doing whatever he did. I turned and walked to my room, my head spinning. I knew I was doing the right thing, but that didn't make it less terrifying. I didn't have a solid plan or know where I'd go, but I wasn't letting them bully me into giving up my savings. That money was my future, and I wouldn't let them take it just because Matt was too lazy to get his life together. The next few days were tense. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was to pile on more guilt. My mom sat at the kitchen table, sniffling and wiping her eyes like I'd broken her heart. My dad muttered about how ungrateful I was, how I was tearing the family apart. But I stayed firm. I quietly packed my stuff, moving things to a friend's place bit by bit. I didn't want a big scene, but I had to be ready to leave. Part of me hoped they'd come to their senses, realize what they were asking wasn't fair, but each day made it clearer. They weren't budging. They'd chosen Matt over me, and there was no changing their minds. The night before I was supposed to leave, my mom tried one last time to guilt me into staying. She came to my room, eyes red from crying, and sat on my bed. "Please don't do this," she said softly. "You don't have to leave. We can work something out." I shook my head. "Mom, I'm not giving Matt my savings. That's the only way I'm staying, right?" She didn't say anything for a long time. Just stared at the floor. Finally, she got up and walked out without a word, and that was it. The next day, I packed the last of my things and left. Leaving felt unreal, like stepping out of one life into another. I had my backpack over one shoulder, duffel bag in hand, heart pounding. My mom didn't say anything as I walked out. She was in the kitchen staring at the table. My dad was nowhere to be seen. I guess that was their way of showing they didn't care if I stayed or left. Outside, I felt a strange mix of freedom and panic. I hadn't thought much past leaving. I had some stuff at a friend's place and planned to crash there temporarily, but the reality hit hard. I was basically homeless. I showed up at my buddy's place later that day. He was one of the few I'd told about the situation and he was cool with me staying on his couch for a bit. We sat down that night and I spilled everything from my parents demanding my savings to the final blow of them kicking me out. "Dude, that's messed up," he said, shaking his head. "I don't get why they'd expect you to hand over everything like that." I shrugged, still trying to process it. "It's always been like that with Matt. He screws up and somehow it's my problem to fix. This time they just took it to a new level." We talked for hours, mostly about how I'd handle things moving forward. He offered to let me stay as long as I needed, but I didn't want to overstay. I appreciated it, but I knew I couldn't live on his couch forever. The next few days were a blur of figuring out my next move. I reached out to my school's housing office for emergency accommodations, but they had nothing available. They gave me leads on local resources, which was better than nothing. I started looking for cheap apartments near campus, but most were way out of my price range, even with my savings intact. The idea of dipping into my business fund for rent made me anxious. Meanwhile, my parents were radio silent. Not a single text or call. It was like I didn't exist. I had a sliver of hope they'd realize how messed up this was and reach out, but nothing. Matt didn't say anything either, which wasn't surprising. He was probably pissed I didn't hand over my savings for his fancy new place. Typical. After about a week at my friend's, things started getting to me. It wasn't just the uncertainty of where I'd live, but the isolation. My parents had cut me off, and I felt like I was in limbo, trying to figure out what my life looked like without them. One night, I was scrolling through my phone, debating whether to reach out to them. Part of me wanted to fix things, even though I knew it wouldn't happen. But before I could overthink it, I got a message from Matt. Short and to the point. Hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I stared at the screen, feeling anger and disbelief. Ruined everything? How was this on me? He was the one trying to take my money and I was the one kicked out for standing up for myself. In Matt's mind, I was the villain. I didn't reply. There was no point. Anything I said would turn into another fight, and I was done fighting. I tossed my phone on the couch and focused on what to do next. The next day, I met with a lawyer. I'd been putting it off, not wanting to escalate things. But after Matt's message, I wasn't taking chances. I needed to protect my savings and know my legal options if things got worse. The lawyer was surprisingly chill, listened without interrupting, and gave solid advice. The good news, legally, my parents couldn't touch my savings without my consent. The bad news, they might try a loophole if desperate. He recommended securing my financial documents and keeping a paper trail of any family interactions just in case. I left the meeting feeling more confident. I had legal protection and a plan if my parents tried anything shady. But it also felt heavier. I wasn't just dealing with a family argument, but the possibility my parents might try to screw me over legally. It was depressing. Over the next couple of weeks, I focused on getting my life back on track. I found a better paying part-time job and saved every penny. Determined not to touch my business fund unless absolutely necessary. I kept looking for apartments and got lucky. A tiny studio a bit far from campus, but cheap and within my budget. I moved in at the end of the month. It wasn't much. A single room with a small kitchen and a bathroom like a closet, but it was mine. After everything, that meant the world. For the first time in weeks, I felt some control over my life. Still, things with my family were non-existent. They hadn't contacted me since Matt's message. No apologies, no attempts to patch things up. It was like I'd been erased. Part of me was hurt, but part was relieved. I didn't have to deal with their drama. I was free to focus on my goals without being dragged into Matt's messes. But even with that freedom, it got overwhelming sometimes. I'd lie in bed wondering if I'd made the right choice or if I could have handled things differently. Every time I thought about giving in, I reminded myself why I'd left. This was my life, my savings, my future. No one, not even my family, was taking that from me. Settling into my apartment was a mix of relief and loneliness. I had my own place, free from guilt-tripping parents and Matt's entitlement. It was just me and my thoughts in a space I could call mine. But it felt off like, yeah, I was free, but not the freedom I expected at 19. The apartment was tiny, barely fitting a bed, desk, and mini fridge, but I didn't mind. I'd made do with less, and my savings were safe, untouched. That was what mattered. The first few weeks were about adjusting. I threw myself into work and school, keeping my head down. I picked up extra shifts at my new job to cover rent and expenses without touching my business savings. It wasn't easy, but it felt good knowing every penny went towards something mine. My business dream wasn't dead. Not by a long shot, but the past kept creeping in. I'd wonder if my parents would reach out, apologize, or if Matt would grow up and see how much of a jerk he'd been. Part of me wanted closure, even though I knew it wasn't likely. One night, I got a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was spam, but it was my dad. He'd changed his number, probably so I couldn't ignore him. The message was clear. We need to talk. It's time to move past this. I stared at it for hours, debating whether to respond. I hadn't heard from them in weeks, and now they wanted to move past everything just like that. It didn't sit right. I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine, especially without any remorse from them. So, I didn't reply. I wasn't getting dragged back into their mess just because they decided they were ready to talk. A couple of days later, Matt texted. "We need to fix this." Fix what? There was nothing to fix on my side. He hadn't reached out since I left. No apology, no acknowledgement of their unfairness. He probably just wanted to guilt me into feeling bad. I was done with that game and didn't reply. That's when I realized I was done waiting for them. I didn't owe them a conversation, forgiveness, or my savings. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. It wasn't perfect, and I still had moments of doubt, but I knew I'd made the right call. They could reach out all they wanted, but unless they took responsibility, I wasn't interested. Life moved on. I dove into my business plans whenever I had time, researching, networking online, and figuring out how to make it work. It was slow, but it was progress. I wasn't stuck in that toxic cycle with my family, constantly fearing betrayal or manipulation. Just when I thought I was moving forward, I got a curveball. A few weeks after the texts, an old family friend called. We hadn't talked in ages, so it was odd seeing their name. They sounded hesitant, like they didn't want to share why they'd called. "Son, you should know. Your parents have been telling people things about why you left. It's not good." A pit formed in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, bracing myself. "They're saying you abandoned the family," they continued. "You refused to help Matt when he was struggling and left because you didn't want to be part of the family anymore. They're making it sound like you ditched them for no reason." Of course. Classic. They couldn't accept they'd driven me away with their ridiculous demands, so they made me the villain. It pissed me off, but it wasn't surprising. My parents were always good at twisting the narrative to play victims. I thanked the friend for the heads up and hung up, trying not to let it get to me. I knew the truth and had receipts if needed. If they wanted to spread lies, that was on them. I wasn't letting it derail my progress. After that, I blocked their numbers for good. I didn't need the drama. The situation taught me about boundaries and protecting myself from people who didn't respect them, no matter how they tried to guilt trip me. Since cutting them off, things got better. I found my rhythm with work and school, balancing my job and business plans. I started hanging out with friends more, enjoying life without stressing about home drama. It wasn't perfect. There were moments I wish my family wasn't so messed up, but I was learning to accept I couldn't change them or fix things by giving in. I had to let go of hoping they'd apologize. I was building something for myself, my business, my future, my life. Even if it wasn't always easy, it felt damn good to do it on my terms. I wasn't looking back. They could guilt trip all they wanted, but I was done being the guy who gave up everything for peace. I was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time I felt in control of my own life.